Hi, welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Doc Talk. This is episode 71A.
I'm Cam and this is Julie.
Yes.
This week's Torah portion is from Genesis 23 until 25:18. So last week we ended with the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, and then in 22:20 and down we see at the end of the Akedah where Abraham and his two go, and it talks about them going back and staying in Beersheba, and then it gives this lineage, this kind of weird lineage of Nahor, which is Abraham's brother. And it seems to be randomly placed at the end of the binding of Isaac, because next in this week is 23 that starts, and it starts with Sarah's death.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like what we see a little bit later where we have the events of Joseph, then we have this one chapter about Judah. That's kind of what this is. This is all about Isaac, but in Isaac's story is this important aspect of his mother, Sarah, dying. So we see this lineage of Nahor because that's where the wife of Isaac's going to come from.
Right.
So we have the binding of Isaac, okay, the understanding, the foreshadowing of Messiah, what he does for us.
Right.
And then what happens after that? After that is that whole idea of the search for the bride.
Right.
I mean, that's what's happening now. The Holy Spirit's been sent out. We see in 24, Eleazar, the servant, the unnamed servant, goes out, right?
Right.
To search for this bride. So it really does all come together. And so it's not just randomly, here's a lineage randomly placed. It's to give us the understanding of this really is from Abraham's line or Abraham's family that the bride's being called out of. You see, it's got to be within the family. It can't just be some Gentile that doesn't look or know anything about the family. It has to be from the family.
Right. And, Paul says that. He says that it's all for our learning, right? So
Right.
as we read it in that order, we can understand the bigger picture of what's happening now.
Yeah, and the order, that's a great segue to this point, which is we see some weird order happening this week because in chapter 25, suddenly it's talking about Abraham and how he takes another wife.
Right. Okay.
Keturah, and then these 6 kids he has. And it's kind of like listed afterwards, all right? But there's nothing that says that's actually the order. We don't find out about any of them until after the fullness of Isaac actually happens. And by fullness, I mean, now, remember, man was separated, male and female, and back.
Right.
Here we have Isaac and needs a bride. And once he gets the bride, now he can fully rule. Okay, now let's talk about the others.
Oh, okay.
Because, see, next week we're going to go into Isaac's lineage, which now it brings us into the real story about Jacob and Esau. There are 3 major opinions about what's happening in 25. So one is that she, Keturah, was actually taken as a second wife before Genesis 17.
Okay.
However, being as a second wife, she would have been considered as a concubine per se, but she was never a servant or a maiden to Sarah. See, Hagar was a maiden to Sarah, and every time you see Hagar, it says, and Sarah's servant, or Sarah's maiden. Because Hagar is never considered a wife. Remember,
Right.
her child was supposed to go to bring Sarah that heir. Now,
Right.
Sarah, as the first wife, it means that her child is the one that's going to be the heir. And like we know, she tried it through Ishmael, it didn't work, and so it ends up being Isaac. However,
the one who it was supposed to be in the first place.
Exactly.
Right. Just want to throw that in
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So there's this discussion that this other wife was actually there with these kids, but it was always understood that those kids were never going to be the first heir. One of the other reasons that that's considered is because this would have allowed these sons to have been circumcised before the promised child. Well, we know that Isaac is the first child that's circumcised out of Abraham's group on the 8th day. That first fruit idea.
Right.
Well, if he's the last, because remember, in 17, it talks about, but, Abraham's so old. He's 100. Like, he can't have kids.
Right.
And, of course, Sarah's beyond childbearing years.
Right.
So, here's a question. Was Abraham really not able to have children? Because if so, then that means these kids had to have been born before he reached 100.
Right.
Now, other thought is, no, once he
was rejuvenated.
Once he was rejuvenated, he said, let's give me another woman.
Yeah.
get her younger.
Hey, that
or whatever.
happens. It
Yeah,
happens.
It happens, So here's my thought process. So that would make 6 sons, and then however many, because you know she probably had some daughters or whatever in there. These are just significant 6.
Right.
So these 6 sons would have all been born after the sign of the promise was given.
See, I like that. I like that one.
That's possible. Still having Isaac the first, and then having others, that's very possible. The third one was basically they're scattered all the way through. And Isaac happened, but these are all being born. There were some before, there were some after, because there's 6 kids, and then possibly others. She's having the kids throughout the process, but that's not a part of the significant story. Remember, we see this many times in the Word where, example, Moshe. Moses has 2 sons, right? But you hear of them this much.
Right.
You don't ever really hear about them when they're in the wilderness because it's not significant to the pattern.
Oh, that happens this week in the Haftorah. David has many wives, but there's only 7 of significance.
Right.
Which for the pattern that we're going to talk about,
what?
that is significant.
Yes,
especially
it is.
Which son does this and which son is actually the heir. And
right.
It's good.
Yes. See?
Good stuff.
So, and just like we know with Noah, so there's 3 boys that are discussed, but are they the only children he had?
Right.
Probably not. He was 500 years old. Exactly. The only ones that made it. And then here's another thing. So, granted, that's before the flood, but he's 500 years old having kids. We're saying Abraham can't have kids at 100?
Yeah.
So,
I'm
there's
41,
a lot of...
and I don't think I can have kids.
We don't know which of these theories is right. It may be a combination of several of them. However it works, it's great to speculate. We do know, that's right, one day we'll know. But we do know he has 6 other significant children that are named.
Okay.
And everyone named throughout the Torah, though we may not understand why, is significant. There was a reason why their names are written down in this story. Later, they become very important, such as Midian. Hello, Moshe goes to Midian, to that family. That is the children of Abraham. We see in 25:5 that it says, now Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. And then the other kids are given gifts while he's still alive and sent off. And I caught something this year that I've missed all the other years.
Okay.
And that is that Abraham doesn't leave. See, in my head, he gave it to Isaac, and then he and the children left.
Uh-huh.
But it doesn't say that. It just says he sent the other sons to the east. They're all blessed by him. They're all still children of Abraham.
Right.
They all still bear the mark. Right. They still bear the mark of the covenant. Mm-hmm. And again, that covenant is the covenant that they mark or bear actually says that Isaac's going to get the land. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, yeah.
That's what that is. They are also walking testimony that their brother is the one that's going to receive it. Not just because they bear the mark, but they also receive gifts. But see, they're blessed by Abraham. What you got?
I was thinking, well, no wonder there was such a spirit that went through early Christianity to say Paul was against circumcision. Because that would actually say that it's their land. Ooh. It's Isaac's land.
Yeah.
Right? And then that just gave way because they were replacement theology that said, well, we're going to take the land and,
Yeah,
that really
started goes with the ball rolling.
Yes, that really goes with the Haftorah this week about, one rising to power and wanting all of it, and it's not their rightful place. Yeah. To do that.
So we see this with the brothers, okay, and they all go off. Now, here's the deal. If at 140 is how old Abraham was when Isaac marries, when Isaac and Rebekah marry, he's 140. So let's say he has Keturah after that, gets married. So in those next 40 years, he's having at least 6 boys, all right? All right, so let's say he started right away at 40. So you got the oldest child could be is 35 years old before he dies. They all have to be old enough to willingly or be able to go away.
Right.
That makes sense?
Right.
You're not sending a 3-year-old off. Now go on.
To the east.
Here's your present. Right. These are all men who are ready to have their tribes. It even lists some of their children with their children. Yes. Right. And they already have their kids. They're going out as small tribes, not as one son. They're not going out like Ishmael and Hagar went. Just the mom and the son.
Mm-hmm.
And he was 16 to 18 years old. Okay.
Right.
They're going out with the blessing and their own little clans going out to go find where they're going to settle in order to
be fruitful and multiply.
Right. And they're going to be obedient to that. And they understand the traditions and the walk of Abraham. And they're going to carry some of that. Again, which is why later when we see Moses with Midian, he fits in just fine.
Right.
He's understanding. They share a lot of things, which is also why later when we see Jethro come in, he's like, oh yeah, he's understanding so
Yahweh.
much. Right, they worship him. So it's not a foreign idea to them. That's why he's invited to come, and Jethro's invited to stay with them because they have the same God.
Right.
It wasn't just Israel that did it. It's just out of all those, Israel's the one that has that promise. We're going to have to come through that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to throw this out there. We see at the end of 24 that when Rebecca comes, they go into Sarah's tent.
Right.
It's 3 years since she's died. Since Sarah died.
Oh, really? I thought it was a year.
It's 3 years.
Why did I think it was a year?
I don't know. But 3 years is significant.
Well, yeah.
Because he does not get his bride for 3 years after the Akedah. Hello? 3 years,
third
right?
day.
Yeah, third day. We got it. And then, the third 3,000, at the end of the 3,000th, the bride comes.
Mm-hmm.
And listen to this. If it is lined up, we're at the end of 24, once they're put together, okay, the bride and the groom are together, and they go into Sarah's tent,
Mm-hmm.
and then if that's when 25:5 is, now everything's given to Isaac and everyone departs, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, look at this on the big picture.
Okay.
Once Messiah,
It's given the bride. Okay.
is given the bride, but when is that? Let's say that's at the end of the millennium.
Okay.
You see, he's going to reign
when
here
it
for
comes
1,000
down.
years.
Right,
We
right.
know that at the end, Hasatan comes back and leads all these people against him.
Right.
But in eternity, he actually will reign over everything.
Right.
You notice in Adam, when Adam was first created, everything was in him.
Mm-hmm.
So was female, right?
Right.
Male and female were in him.
Right.
Well, in eternity, a thought is once the bride and groom come together
Uh-huh.
in Sarah's tent, we know from Galatians and Hebrews 11
Mm-hmm.
that Sarah's tent is called the New Jerusalem.
Yes. Yes, we do.
So when the bride and groom come into the New Jerusalem
Mm-hmm.
as one, now all authority, it's all yours.
Yeah.
We also see that when they go into the tent, it says that Isaac was comforted.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a V8 moment running this morning and went, oh, does it fit? It does, because Yeshua would have just finished the great white throne. And could you imagine the grief you have of
Yes.
watching this creation that you've made, some of them having to go off with Hasatan and his group?
Yes. No.
I
I can't
mean-
imagine.
Me either. But wow, to need to be comforted in Sarah's tent in New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just see the pattern so much there. And again, all authority is given. And knowing in 25 now that Abraham does not leave, he still remains. Well, the father is the one who's going to also be in New Jerusalem.
Right.
So I say all that to say the tent was already set up in Beersheba. So it doesn't make sense that they moved her tent from Haran, came and set it up for 3 years just to sit there. Proverbs 31, where you have, the woman, and she buys and sells. She's always doing, she's so busy.
Right.
So then take that and then kind of think, okay, it said that she understood that something was going on with Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought process was Isaac was 37 years old when this happened, making her the year in which she dies, about 127.
Right.
And so she goes to Hebron to purchase the cave. She's going to Hebron. I'm not saying she is. The thought process is, wouldn't it be interesting if she's going to Hebron to buy this cave because their son is about to be killed?
Oh.
They're expecting resurrection,
Yeah.
but they don't know if it's instant or in 3 days or when.
Mm-hmm.
So you go into Hebron and do that. And in the process, she either is grieved or whatever, she dies there.
Oh. Okay.
Interesting thought.
Yes. Interesting thought.
So, because here's the thing, when Abraham goes to her, he knows exactly what he's going to get. He knows exactly where he wants to. It's like he has to go walk around and look. He knows exactly what he wants. Now, one of the reasons I believe is because in Genesis 13
Mm-hmm.
is where we see he sets up that altar. It's in that area.
Oh,
So
yeah.
where he sets up his altar to the Lord is the same place that he and the patriarchs will be buried. And that's significant because it's where David rules his first 7 years of Israel. There's a lot of connections with David, who is a foreshadowing of Messiah, right? We see where she's buried is where David first rules. We also see where Rachel dies is where he's born and he lives. And it's where Messiah is born, right? There's a lot of these overlying events happening in the same place in order, again, to even build up more to point to, oh, that's Messiah. It must be.
Right.
Because he fulfills all these patterns. One of the other, I guess, overlying patterns I saw that I thought was really cool was, we know in Revelation it says the Spirit and bride say come, right?
Yes.
And here with the water and the well, and here the bride to be is working with the water. She's carrying the water. She actually gives the water to the camels that are going to carry her and her maidens.
Yeah.
You know, her nurse leaves with her, kind of like a maid of honor, okay?
Right.
But so do all these other maidens. They go with her. They fill up all 10 camels. 10 virgins, right? Matthew 25. What I thought was interesting is we have the Spirit and the bride working together. That's on different levels. We have Eleazar, the unnamed servant, right?
Right.
Going out to find and give the gifts to the bride. And then we have the bride herself that's working with the water. I find that so significant because in 25 with the 10 virgins, they had the oil, which is like the Holy Spirit, the Torah, the light. They had to be working it.
Right.
You realize that Abraham releases responsibility to Eleazar once he asks the bride and the family, will you come? And they have a choice to say yes or no. And if they say no, Eleazar is done. Isn't that kind of what we see today? Once he points us to Messiah, okay, and then how to walk, he's our tutor,
Right.
how to walk in that, then it's not that he's done, but it now goes into our court. Yes or no, it becomes our responsibility. Will we do it or not?
Right.
And if we don't, we've quenched the Holy Spirit. It's no longer he's not to blame. We are.
Right.
And, you know, we see in 24 where Eleazar's like, let's go. Because every time we see Abraham doing something, it's the next morning. There's no waiting. She says, when presented, do you want to go now or wait 10 days? She's like, I'm out of here. And that 10 days, God takes me to Revelation, where there's the 10 days of persecution. Anyway, it just goes on and takes you about through everywhere in the Bible to see how this whole thing, it's like strings. You start pulling them together, you know, and then you push them and you pull them together, and suddenly you have this beautiful tapestry. That's what happens when you look at the Torah and look at, I guess, the bigger picture, the strings, and start pulling them. Things aren't unraveling. They're actually coming together when we do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
We're going to wrap up on that note. I know that there are so many other places we could have gone this week that are more traditional, but we thought we'd kind of throw some nuggets out there for you to catch and chew on and digest and go back and look some more. So we enjoyed it. We had fun. We thank you so much for joining us this week for Doc Talk. We'll see you on the flip side with Julie and the prophets. Shalom.